Something's off. It's not obvious at first, just a quiet whisper deep inside, screaming louder with each passing day. Everything feels too vivid, too tangible. Yet my family keeps insisting it's all in my head. I desperately want to believe them. I truly try. But deep down, I sense the undeniable truth. Something is wrong. It began subtly, with my wife's innocent whistling. She always hummed the same soothing melody whenever she cooked, soft notes drifting through the air like warm sunlight. A harmless ritual, she'd say, something to focus her thoughts. But then, out of nowhere, it changed. One morning, the melody warped. Off-key, jagged, grating against my mind like sharp glass. I didn't say anything, just endured quietly, convinced I was overreacting. But my skin crawled until dinner was served, finally bringing silence. The next day, it returned, twisted further, random notes splattering into chaos. I cracked, couldn't stop myself, and asked her why she changed the tune. Her eyes met mine with a vacant stare. "What are you talking about?" Her voice was calm, but detached. "I've always whistled the same song." My blood turned to ice. A nervous laugh escaped me as I returned to my tasks, desperately forcing myself to forget. But forgetting became impossible. My son came home, oblivious as my wife's disturbing tune continued. Frantic, I grabbed him, desperate for validation, asking if he noticed the melody change. He rolled his eyes. "What? It's the same annoying song she always whistles. If anything, I wish she'd pick something new." Another icy shock rattled my bones. Was I losing my grip on reality? For days, I tried ignoring it. Just a melody, I told myself. But reality continued to warp. On the fourth day, her voice shifted, deepened, roughened, as though she'd smoked heavily for decades. Tentatively, I asked if her throat hurt. She laughed dismissively. My family joined her, mocking smiles, painting me the fool. "You're tired, sweetheart. You need rest," she cooed softly. I laughed along weakly, masking my dread. Soon, it wasn't just the melody or her voice. My own children were changing. One day, they arrived home. Their familiar brown hair suddenly transformed into bright, golden blonde. Panic surged within me as I confronted my wife, demanding to know why she'd let them dye their hair without my knowledge. She placed a gentle, worried hand on my forehead. "Honey, you're scaring me. They've always been blonde." Heart racing, I immediately scheduled an appointment with my therapist, the man who'd guided me through my darkest days years ago. Upon entering, I reached out instinctively to shake his familiar hand. There was no hand, only a stump remained. He caught my gaze, expression hardening. "We've discussed this many times. I lost it in a childhood accident. Surely you remember." No, I didn't. I remembered his firm handshake distinctly. He leaned closer, his voice gentle yet stern. "We've related this before. To your struggles with self-esteem, remember?" My mind felt scorched, broken. He prescribed medication for stress and I took it, not out of trust, but sheer desperation. Weeks dragged on. My wife's eerie melody persisted. Her voice remained alien, and my children's hair mocked my memory with its unnatural golden glow. Then came my daughter's smile. One day, she returned from school, wearing the same clothes, carrying the same backpack, her face unchanged, except her teeth. Short, uneven, and spaced apart. Nothing like her flawless smile. My stomach twisted as she opened her mouth wide, laughing loudly, showcasing those unsettling teeth. "What happened to your teeth?" The words exploded from my lips. She burst into tears. My wife glared daggers. My son snarled. "What's wrong with you? She's always had teeth like that." My mind spiraled. I stumbled to the family photos, heart hammering. With trembling hands, I lifted each frame. Horror stared back. Blonde children with unsettling smiles. I blacked out. 4 hours later, I awoke, confused. My son sat beside me, unblinking, rigid. Minutes crawled by in eerie silence. "Luke, why are you staring?" I asked weakly. He laughed. A chilling, guttural sound, his body jerking violently. His fists slammed repeatedly against the chair. My wife rushed in, frantic. "Luke, baby, calm down. Everything's all right." He stilled but never blinked, his gaze drilling into my soul. Sophie burst in, apologizing frantically. "I'm sorry. I forgot to close the door." My wife whipped around, furious. "You know what happens when you leave it open." My sanity cracked. "What's going on? What's happening?" Sophie stared, eyes filled with disdainful pity. "Dad, you're never here. You've always ignored it. Luke has always been this way. Autistic. You know that." I didn't know any of this. And so, here I remain, living among strangers. A wife whose voice isn't hers, a daughter whose smile terrifies me, and a son who trembles and stares at me, unreadable. But I've started digging. I'm not alone. Others are noticing. Small shifts, distorted melodies, family members morphing quietly in the shadows. Something is happening. Something silent, subtle, terrifying. Watch closely, listen carefully, notice every detail. Or one morning, you may wake to find yourself surrounded by strangers wearing familiar faces. The end.